Once upon a time, in the beautiful city of Lagos, there lived a breathtakingly beautiful lady named Adaobi. Her beauty was like a golden sunrise, mesmerizing anyone who crossed her path. Her hair flowed like a river of black silk, her eyes sparkled like stars, and her laughter was as sweet as the tinkling of bells. But it wasn't just her looks that made her famous. Adaobi was also very wealthy. She owned businesses, drove fancy cars, and lived in a mansion so big it looked like a palace. Adaobi's fame spread far and wide, and men from all corners of the city wanted to marry her. But Adaobi had a secret, a dangerous secret that no one knew. One sunny afternoon, Adaobi decided it was time to find a husband, or rather, husbands. She sent out an invitation to the wealthiest and most handsome men in Lagos, promising them a chance to win her heart. Over 100 men showed up, but Adaobi chose only 10. They were Chidi, the successful businessman who owned a fleet of transport buses; Ikenna, the charming lawyer who always won his cases; Emeka, the gentle doctor with healing hands; Obinna, the talented musician whose songs melted hearts; Uche, the chef who could cook meals fit for a king; Kelechi, the strong farmer who supplied the city with fresh produce; Toby, the brave firefighter who saved lives daily; Bayo, the engineer who built skyscrapers; Benga, the funny comedian who made everyone laugh; Yemi, the rich trader who dealt in gold and jewels. Each man was smitten with Adaobi and believed he was her only love. But little did they know, Adaobi had married all 10 of them secretly, promising each one that he was the only man in her life. Adaobi was clever. She scheduled her husband's visits so that none of them ever met. Each man had his own day to spend with her at her grand mansion. But strange things started to happen. Whenever a husband arrived, Adaobi would give him a special drink, her welcome juice. After drinking it, the men would feel dizzy and fall into a deep sleep. When they woke up, they could barely remember what had happened during their visit. The men noticed something odd. They would feel weaker and sicker each time they left Adaobi's mansion. Yet, they kept returning, unable to resist her charm. One day, Chidi, the businessman, started to suspect something was wrong. He noticed that Adaobi always avoided answering questions about her past. She also had a strange room in her mansion that was always locked. Chidi decided to investigate. One evening, while Adaobi was distracted, Chidi sneaked into the mysterious room. What he saw made his heart pound like a drum. Inside the room were 10 small wooden boxes, each labeled with a husband's name. The boxes contained strange items: a strand of hair, a fingernail, and a small clay figure that looked like the man whose name was on the box. Chidi quickly left the room, but he knew he couldn't confront Adaobi alone. He decided to gather the other husbands. Chidi secretly contacted Ikenna, the lawyer, and shared what he had discovered. Ikenna was shocked but agreed to help. They contacted Emeka, Obinna, and the others. When the 10 men finally met, they realized the truth. They were all married to Adaobi. How could this be? She told me I was the only one, cried Uche, the chef. She lied to all of us, said Toby, clenching his fists. The men decided to confront Adaobi, but they needed a plan. Ikenna suggested they visit a wise old herbalist named Baba Afolabi, who lived in a quiet village outside the city. Baba Afolabi listened carefully to their story. He stroked his long white beard and said, "Adaobi is no ordinary woman. She has used juju to trap you all. Those clay figures in her room are tied to your lives. If she destroys them, you will die." The men gasped in horror. "But why is she doing this?" asked Benga, the comedian, who was no longer laughing. Baba Afolabi shook his head. "I do not know her full intentions, but you must act quickly. If she finds out you've discovered her secret, she will destroy you all." The 10 husbands returned to Adaobi's mansion, pretending nothing was wrong. But Adaobi was sharp. She noticed their nervousness. That evening, as they sat in the grand dining hall, Adaobi suddenly stood up and clapped her hands. "I know what you've been up to," she said, her voice as cold as ice. "You think you can outsmart me?" The room fell silent. The men exchanged worried glances. Adaobi laughed, but it wasn't her usual sweet laugh. It was dark and chilling. You've played your little game, but now it's my turn. Before anyone could react, Adaobi snapped her fingers and the lights went out. When the lights came back on, the men were no longer in the dining hall. They were in a dark, eerie cave, surrounded by glowing clay figures that looked just like them. The 10 men stood frozen in the eerie cave. The glowing clay figures seemed to breathe, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The air was thick with a strange, sweet smell that made their heads spin. A cold wind blew through the cave, and from the shadows, Adaobi's voice echoed, sending shivers down their spines. "So, my dear husbands," Adaobi said, her voice silky and mocking, "you thought you could betray me? You thought I would know?" The men huddled together, their fear evident. Chitty, the businessman, whispered, "We must stay strong. We can't let her break us." But before anyone could respond, Adaobi stepped out of the shadows, dressed in a flowing black gown that shimmered like the night sky. Her beauty was even more mesmerizing, but her eyes burned with a fiery intensity. "You fools," Adaobi hissed. "Do you know why I chose you? Do you think this is about love?" The men stared at her, trembling. "Let me tell you a story," Adaobi began, her voice dripping with venom. "Long ago, I was just an ordinary girl, living in a small village. My beauty was a curse. It brought me nothing but pain. Men fought over me. Families were torn apart, and I was blamed for everything. They called me a witch and banished me from my home." She paused, her expression darkening. "I wandered the forests for days, hungry and alone, until I met an old woman named Neoma. She wasn't an ordinary woman. She was a powerful juju priestess. She took me in, taught me the ways of the spirits, and gave me the power to control men. I swore to never let anyone hurt me again." Adaobi's lips curled into a cruel smile. "And now, here you are, trapped in my web. You are nothing but pawns in my game." Kelechi, the strong farmer, stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. "We are not pawns, Adaobi. Whatever power you think you have, we will fight it." Adaobi laughed, a sound that echoed like thunder in the cave. "Fight? Against me? How amusing." She raised her hand, and the clay figures began to glow brighter. The men felt a strange pain in their chests, as if their hearts were being squeezed. They fell to their knees, gasping for air. "You see," Adaobi said calmly, "as long as I have these figures, I control your lives." But as she spoke, Obinna, the musician, noticed something. The figures were arranged in a circle, with a glowing crystal in the center. The crystal seemed to pulse with energy, and Obinna realized it was the source of Adaobi's power. "Destroy the crystal," Obinna whispered to Chitty. Chitty nodded, but they needed a distraction. Uche, the chef, quickly stood up, despite the pain. "Adaobi," he shouted, "if you hate men so much, why marry us in the first place? What are we to you?" Adaobi's eyes narrowed. "You want to know? Fine. Each of you serves a purpose. Chitty brings wealth. Ikenna brings knowledge. Emeka brings healing. And the rest of you, you are pieces of a puzzle, feeding my power." While Adaobi was distracted, Chitty and Kelechi inched toward the glowing crystal. Just as they reached it, Adaobi turned and saw them. "No," she screamed, raising her hands to summon her magic. Before Adaobi could act, a loud voice boomed through the cave. "Stop." Everyone froze. From the darkness, an old man with a long white beard appeared, leaning on a staff. It was Baba Afolabi, the herbalist the men had visited earlier. Adaobi's face twisted with rage. "You dare to interfere, old man?" Baba Afolabi chuckled. "Adaobi, you've played with forces beyond your understanding. Your greed and anger have corrupted the gifts you were given. Leave, before I destroy you too." Adaobi threatened. Baba Afolabi raised his staff, and a bright light filled the cave. The clay figures stopped glowing, and the men felt the pain in their chests fade. "Your power is tied to the crystal," Baba Afolabi said calmly. But without the spirit of forgiveness, your power will destroy you. At Baba Afolabi's words, Adaobi froze. Her mind raced back to the old woman who had saved her. Neoma had warned her, if you let hatred guide your actions, you will lose everything. For the first time, Adaobi looked uncertain. I just wanted to protect myself, she whispered. Baba Afolabi nodded. You have a choice, Adaobi. Let go of your anger, or face the consequences. But before Adaobi could respond, the crystal began to crack. The cave trembled, and a deafening roar filled the air. The men scrambled to their feet as the walls began to collapse. Run, Baba Afolabi shouted. The men raced toward the exit, but Adaobi stayed behind, clutching the crystal. No, this is my power. I can't lose it. Just as the men reached the cave's entrance, a blinding light erupted behind them. They turned to see Adaobi engulfed in the light, her figure glowing brightly before disappearing. The cave fell silent. Is she gone? Ikenna asked, panting. Baba Afolabi shook his head. Her story is not over. Adaobi's choices will shape her fate, but she will return. And when she does, the battle will begin again. The men exchanged uneasy glances, knowing that their journey was far from over. The 10 men, along with Baba Afolabi, stood outside the collapsed cave, their breaths heavy and hearts pounding. The silence was eerie. The once glowing crystal had shattered, and Adaobi had disappeared into the blinding light. But no one felt relief, not yet. Chitty broke the silence. Do you think she's really gone? Baba Afolabi shook his head solemnly. Adaobi is powerful, more than you know. She may have been consumed by her own magic, but she will return. Her kind of hatred doesn't fade, it only grows. The men exchanged uneasy glances. Kalechi, the farmer, frowned. What do we do now? If she comes back, she'll destroy us. Baba Afolabi tapped his staff on the ground, his gaze thoughtful. The answer lies in her past. To defeat her, you must understand her pain. Only then can you break the curse she's placed upon you. Baba Afolabi led the men to a quiet village deep in the forest, where Adaobi's story had begun. The path was long and treacherous, filled with thick vines and the cries of wild animals. Along the way, the men couldn't help but wonder about the woman who had caused them so much pain. I don't understand, Emeka, the doctor said. If she was hurt by others, why would she choose to hurt us? She doesn't see it that way, Baba Afolabi explained. To Adaobi, you are symbols of the power and control she never had. But there's more to her than anger. You'll see. When they finally reached the village, they found a small, ancient shrine surrounded by overgrown trees. Inside, they discovered old carvings and a large painting of a woman with eyes like Adaobi's, but her face was kind, and her smile was gentle. This is Neoma, Baba Afolabi said. She was the one who gave Adaobi her powers, but she also gave her warnings. If you want answers, you must call upon Neoma's spirit. The men formed a circle as Baba Afolabi performed a ritual, chanting ancient words that filled the air with energy. Suddenly, a soft light appeared in the center of the shrine, and the figure of an old woman emerged. It was Neoma, her presence both powerful and calming. Why have you summoned me? Neoma asked, her voice echoing like a song. Chitty stepped forward, bowing his head. We need to understand Adaobi. She has trapped us, cursed us, and nearly destroyed us. We want to know why. Neoma sighed deeply, her expression filled with sorrow. Adaobi was once a pure soul, but her heart was poisoned by betrayal and pain. She came to me seeking power to protect herself, and I granted her wish. But power, without forgiveness, turns to darkness. The men listened intently as Neoma continued. Adaobi's first betrayal came from her closest friend, Ngozi. They were like sisters, but Ngozi grew jealous of Adaobi's beauty and spread lies about her. The village turned against Adaobi, banishing her and accusing her of being a witch. Is there no way to save her? Obinna, the musician, asked. Neoma's gaze softened. Adaobi's spirit is trapped between light and darkness. To free her, You must help her see the truth, that love and trust can exist again. But beware, the darkness in her heart has grown strong. She will resist. As Neoma's spirit faded, the shrine began to tremble. A cold wind swept through, and the men heard a familiar voice, Adaobi's. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, filled with rage. You dare to seek Neoma's help? Adaobi's voice boomed. You think you can change me? A swirling mist appeared, and from it, Adaobi emerged, her beauty more dazzling but her eyes darker than ever. She no longer looked fully human. Her skin glowed faintly, and her hair floated as if moved by an invisible breeze. Did you think I was gone? She sneered. You can't escape me. You belong to me. The men stepped back, fear gripping them. Baba Afolabi stepped forward, his staff glowing with light. Adaobi, your anger is consuming you. Let go of your hatred, or it will destroy you. Adaobi laughed, a sound that sent chills down their spines. Let go? Never. My power is all I have. She raised her hands, and the ground beneath them cracked. The men were thrown off their feet, and dark tendrils of magic began to wrap around them. As the tendrils tightened, Chitty shouted, Adaobi, stop. We're not your enemies. Not my enemies. Adaobi's voice was full of mockery. You're all the same. Liars, betrayers, users. Ikenna, the lawyer, struggled to speak. We didn't hurt you, Adaobi. Whatever happened to you wasn't our fault. For a moment, Adaobi hesitated. Her expression flickered with doubt, but the darkness quickly returned. It doesn't matter. You're all the same, and you will pay. But as Adaobi prepared to strike, Obinna began to sing. His voice was soft at first, but it grew stronger, filling the air with a melody so beautiful it seemed to calm the storm. Adaobi froze, her eyes widening as memories flooded her mind. Memories of a time when she sang with her mother in the fields, before the betrayal, before the pain. What is this? She whispered, her voice trembling. It's a song of peace, Obinna said. You remember it, don't you? Adaobi's hands lowered, and the tendrils of magic began to fade. The men felt the pressure lift, but they didn't dare move. Baba Afolabi watched silently, his eyes filled with hope. Adaobi's expression was conflicted. Tears welled up in her eyes, but the darkness in her heart refused to let go. No, she whispered. I can't forgive. I can't trust. They'll hurt me again. Chitty stepped forward cautiously. We don't want to hurt you, Adaobi. Let us help you. But before Adaobi could respond, the ground shook violently. A deep, menacing voice echoed through the air. Adaobi, you dare defy me? The men looked around in fear. From the shadows, a massive figure emerged. It was a dark spirit, the embodiment of Adaobi's hatred and pain. It loomed over them, its eyes glowing red. You belong to me, Adaobi, the spirit growled. You made a pact, and now you will fulfill it. Adaobi fell to her knees, trembling. No, I didn't mean for this to happen. The men looked to Baba Afolabi, who gripped his staff tightly. This is the final test, he said. Adaobi must choose, to let go of her hatred or be consumed by it. The ground trembled beneath Adaobi and the men as the dark spirit loomed above them. Its voice, deep and menacing, echoed through the forest. You cannot escape me, Adaobi, the spirit growled. I am your pain, your anger, your hatred. You fed me with every betrayal, every tear, every broken trust. I am your strength. Adaobi trembled, her glowing figure dimming. She turned to the men, her face a mixture of fear and regret. I didn't want this, she whispered. I only wanted to be free. Baba Afolabi stepped forward, his staff glowing with a warm, golden light. Adaobi, he said firmly, the time has come to make a choice. Will you let this darkness define you, or will you choose to heal? The dark spirit roared, sending a wave of cold energy through the air. The men staggered but stood their ground, their determination growing stronger. Chitty, the businessman, spoke up, his voice steady despite the fear in his heart. Adaobi, listen to me. We've all faced pain and betrayal in life. But holding on to anger doesn't heal the wounds. It only makes them deeper. Ikenna, the lawyer, added, "You have the power to let go. It's not too late." The spirit sneered, its form growing larger and darker. "Fools. Her anger is eternal. She belongs to me." But as the spirit moved to strike, Obinna began to sing once more. This time, the melody was joined by the other men, each finding their courage to lend their voices. The song echoed through the forest, a hymn of hope and forgiveness. Adaobi clutched her chest, tears streaming down her face. Memories of her past flooded her mind, her childhood, her laughter with her mother, and even the betrayal that had led her to this moment. She saw herself not as a powerful, vengeful figure, but as a broken soul in need of healing. I don't want this anymore," she whispered. "I don't want to be consumed by hatred." The spirit screamed in rage. "No, you are mine. You cannot escape me." But Adaobi stood tall, her glowing form brightening as she turned to face the spirit. "You do not own me," she said, her voice firm. "You are my pain, but you are not my life. I choose to let you go." With those words, a brilliant light erupted from Adaobi's heart, engulfing the spirit. It howled in agony, shrinking and fading until it was nothing more than a faint shadow. The forest grew still, and the air felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. Adaobi collapsed to her knees, her beauty now softer, her eyes filled with humility. The men approached her cautiously, unsure of what to say. "I'm sorry," Adaobi said, her voice trembling. "I hurt all of you because I was afraid of being hurt again. But I see now that I was wrong." Chitty knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We forgive you, Adaobi. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is that you've chosen to change." The other men nodded in agreement, their expressions kind. Baba Afolabi smiled, his staff glowing faintly. True strength is not in holding on to anger, but in finding the courage to forgive yourself and others. As the group made their way back to the city, Adaobi's mansion, once a cold and lonely place, transformed. The men worked together to turn it into a community center for helping others in need. Adaobi dedicated her wealth and resources to supporting those who felt lost and abandoned, just as she once had. The 10 men, once strangers bound by misfortune, became close friends, each bringing their unique skills to the center. Chitty provided funding, Ikenna offered legal aid, Emeka set up a free clinic, and Uche started a kitchen to feed the hungry. Together, they turned their pain into purpose. 1 year later, the center became a beacon of hope in the city. Adaobi, now a symbol of resilience and redemption, stood before a crowd, sharing her story. "I was lost in anger and pain," she said, her voice steady and warm. "But I learned that healing comes from opening your heart, even when it's hard. None of us can face life's challenges alone. We need each other." The crowd erupted in applause, inspired by her words. Among them were women and men who had been hurt, betrayed, or abandoned, now finding solace in Adaobi's journey. That night, as Adaobi stood alone in the garden, she felt a familiar presence. Baba Afolabi appeared, his expression serious. "You've come far, Adaobi," he said. "But remember, the battle between light and darkness is never truly over. The choices you make each day will determine your path." Adaobi nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "I'll keep choosing the light," she said softly. "I won't let the darkness take me again." Baba Afolabi smiled. "Good. Then your story, Adaobi, will continue to inspire others for generations to come." With a heart full of hope and a mission to help others, Adaobi stepped forward into a brighter future, her past no longer a chain but a lesson that made her stronger. The 10 husbands, now her greatest allies, stood by her side, united by a bond forged in the fires of adversity. And so, the story of Adaobi and her 10 husbands became a legend, told and retold across the land, a tale of pain, redemption, and the power of love and forgiveness to transform even the darkest hearts.